Councilman Bradford?
Yes.
Hi there, it's Marjorie. Representative Stewart is struggling to get on. He'll be back in just a moment.
Okay. I want to give it a few minutes past 6:30. Let people sign up either on Zoom or get on the Facebook Live feed.
Great. I'll check with him now.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Councilman, how are you?
I'm good. I'm rested.
Councilman, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank goodness. Appreciate it.
No problem. Appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. And thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Just going to give everybody a few more minutes if they want to sign into Zoom or if they want to hop on the Facebook feed.
Well, you've certainly been putting a lot of hours into your job lately, like the rest of the council.
Oh yeah, not a night off.
Good grief. Well, good for you to do it, and you know, it's important for the people to be able to speak up, and you were very good with them, so I'm glad.
I appreciate that. I'm just trying to make sure the Facebook Live feed is going through. I've already heard somebody say it's not.
It always takes a minute or two to get everything synced up.
Okay, it looks like it's up and running on Facebook. I got a few more people signing into the room here.
Oh, terrific.
I want to be respectful of your time tonight, Representative Stewart. So I'll go ahead and we'll get the ball rolling. And as people join in, I'll get them added. So thanks to everybody for taking the time tonight to meet with us virtually for my Q3 town hall. Tonight's agenda, as always, I'll give a couple of brief updates about city business, what I've been up to. Then I'll turn it over to our special guest tonight, State Representative Mike Stewart. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what's new on the Hill, what are some updates that will be good for us to know. And then I'll move into a brief 12 or 13 slide presentation, just basically to give some information about our budget process, just to let everybody see the information that we on the council are looking at and having to work through, so that the people of District 13 can kind of understand more about where we're at, how do we get here, what we're trying to do to fix it. So, and then at the end, I'd asked for some questions beforehand, but I hadn't gotten any, so I'll leave a few minutes at the end for any questions. I've got somebody watching the Facebook Live feed who will jot down any questions that are posted there. And then if you want to post a question here on the chat in Zoom, I'll be able to see those and try to get to those. So again, I appreciate everybody for joining us tonight. And so right now, updates from City Hall. We all saw the news. We did have our longest session in Metro history on Tuesday night. Nearly 8 hours of public hearings on the budget. We heard mostly from those who are wanting to invest more in community and schools and less in law enforcement. Those that spoke were very passionate. I wish we could have heard from more individuals on other topics so that we could have a more robust conversation, but we did get quite a few emails, and still, if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to email me. I'll give you my email at the end of this call. From a legislative standpoint, I've been busy putting my name on a few bills for co-sponsoring or resolutions. I did sponsor 2 resolutions honoring some K-9 officers with BNA. The first one was recognizing the life and service of K-9 Rome, who passed away in April. And then another one, which we had to defer this week, was honoring the retirement of K-9 Officer Wolf. So other resolutions that I have put in of supporting the right to vote by mail, supporting our schools. If you've gotten my email recently, my newsletter, I've listed some of the resolutions that I put my name on. Other than that, we're working through the budget process. We had a budget work session today where we were going over some of our wish list items. To kind of explain what a wish list is, we're asked to put down something that wasn't in the budget that we would like to see, or a change we'd like to see in the budget. And we have to specify pretty much, if we do this, where's that money come from? So my 3 wish list items right now was to fully fund the budget request for Metro Animal Care Control to the tune of about $360,000. My suggestion is that we take that money out of the economic development payments to HCA. So it would equal to pretty close to a 50% reduction in the HCA economic development payment. Then I'm also requesting that we hire 20 new firefighters to the cost of $1.638 million. Now, my intention on that funding would be a 50% reduction in our debt payment for Nissan Stadium, which would bring that payment down to $1.2 million, freeing up another $1.2 million, and then a reduction in our partnership payment with the Nashville Chamber of Commerce by the amount of $75,000. So of that, $38,000 would be diverted and added to that $1.2 million to cover the cost of hiring 20 new firefighters for our city. Then the remaining $37,000 from the Nashville Chamber that I'm requesting will be split 4 ways and given to our minority chambers: the LGBT chamber, the Black chamber, the Hispanic chamber, and the Latin American chamber. So those are my wish lists. We'll see if it's even possible to reduce economic development payments. We'll find out. but I wanted everybody to know that I'm trying to make sure that what money we're spending, we're actually spending here on Metro services and helping our citizens and not helping these corporations who, frankly, in my opinion, can afford to pay their own bills. So with that, that's the end of my legislative update. And so I want to go ahead and hand it over to State Rep Mike Stewart so he can give us an update from the Hill.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you inviting me on. And there is a lot of activity going on the Hill, although we haven't had a meeting quite as long as you experienced this week. I would say that if you want to know what's happening on Capitol Hill, you need to think about the budget, which the governor has put out and has some concerning priorities, and then our continued effort to provide relief with respect to the coronavirus, both economically and in terms of getting the virus under control. I'm sure many of you have seen the numbers, and that is still something that has to be fought every day. And then finally, I think it's important to talk about the House and the Senate, because I think you're about to see some fighting between those bodies and how that affects you as citizens. Talking about the budget, Governor Lee released his budget. A lot of press has been focused on the fact that Governor Lee, because of the way the law operates, has given very high-level employees raises while canceling the raises of teachers and state employees. You'll hear, well, that's because of the way the law works. Of course, we can amend the law. I think that's going to have to be balanced out. Obviously, that's unacceptable that at a time when so many people are unemployed, high-wage people at the state level are getting raises while everyone else is getting nothing. That's not appropriate. I think even more significant, and this happened just today, the courts have now completely rejected Governor Lee's effort to create a school voucher program this year. School vouchers are a program which would hand out money to people to go to private schools. In the aggregate, some with taking into account all people involved, the school voucher programs in other states have never worked in terms of improving test scores. And the program is extremely controversial because it takes money away from public schools in just two counties, Davidson County and Shelby County. It would not apply statewide. And then constitutional here in Nashville, Judge Martin did that. And since then, the state has appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court. It's now clear that Governor Lee will not be able to enact the voucher program this year. What that means for the immediate future is that we now have millions of dollars, over $30 million for the voucher program. That's really loose money. Governor Lee today announced that he recognizes he can't move forward with vouchers, so there's no reason to have that funding. So that funding can be used to fill in the gaps for other priorities. A lot of healthcare programs are cut in this budget, programs that help people with severe disabilities. And so if I have a preference, I'll be trying to move this money in to fill some of those gaps in the healthcare area. Obviously, and you know, we have huge healthcare problems, huge gaps, mostly because we've not expanded healthcare under the Affordable Care Act. We're one of the very few states that has not expanded healthcare. I myself have put forward bills to expand healthcare under the Affordable Care Act. We just had an amendment on the floor this week to do that again. The problem is right now, the majority, the Republican majority of the House and the Senate continue to be opposed to healthcare expansion and a Democratic underlying law. I really don't think at this point there's any sensible argument against healthcare expansion. Anyway, we don't have it, fought for it for years. We're going to have it eventually. In the meantime, we need to use these extra monies to fill in the gaps because Tennessee continues to not have the comprehensive health care offerings for its citizens that they would have if they lived in Kentucky or Virginia. That's improper, and we need to do what we can to bridge the gap, particularly for families with severely disabled people, severely disabled family members, or others that need immediate assistance. Our failure to expand healthcare has hurt us with respect to dealing with COVID-19. Obviously, that's a huge healthcare problem. We've seen this week the numbers go up. in Nashville and statewide. How much that's going to be a trend is yet to be seen. Well, 10 days from now, we'll really know how much reopening has affected the COVID-19 issue. But there's no question COVID-19 is still among us. And that's a real problem, both from a healthcare standpoint and, of course, from an economic standpoint, because if we have a second wave and it's severe and starts to fill up our hospitals, then we're going to have to step back from our economic reopening. And many people who are just now getting back to work are going to see the economy dry up again. Unfortunately, economists are predicting that even if we continue to reopen, this is going to be a very difficult, long period of recovery, particularly as the stimulus starts to dry up from Washington. And businesses continue to try to find their way. So we have a long way to go. We need to do everything we can to keep the virus under control. What have I been doing with respect to that? I have been pushing Governor Lee at every level to particularly expand contact tracing to provide essentially person-by-person tracking of the virus. I don't want to say my calls and those of others have fallen on deaf ears. We have slowly built up our contact tracing team to where now Commissioner of Health says we have at least 500 people committed. I think that's about that's at the very most a third of what we need. So we need to continue to push the governor to use the funds that we've already provided to expand our folks that are tracking this virus. We have all these healthcare workers. There are plenty of skilled people out there that can do that. The administration's unwillingness to expand contact tracing has been a real failing, even as, frankly, we've done well on overall testing. So in one area, testing, Tennessee has led the charge in the South. For some reason, the administration has had a terribly slow start on contact tracing. We need to fix that so we can, one, prevent people from getting ill, two, get the economy reopened. One thing you'll see a lot of in the next week, and I know I need to finish up my time here. There are two different approaches to the session going on right now in the House and the Senate. Normally, that's not really the case, but right now the House is passing numerous bills, including all sorts of bills that have nothing to do with COVID-19, nothing to do with any of the pressing emergencies going on in our state right now. And I'll just give you an example for one. Open carry. There's an effort to create constitutional carry so everybody can carry a weapon anywhere they want in the state of Tennessee without having a concealed carry permit. There's no problem with our current permitting system. In any event, whatever you think about that bill, you can agree that it has nothing to do with fighting the coronavirus, nothing to do with anything we really need to deal with right now. The House is passing all sorts of what I view as political bills like that. Meanwhile, the Senate is broadly rejecting that approach. The Senate has said, look, we're going to pass coronavirus-based legislation, get the budget done, and get out of here. And so far, the Senate has shown no inclination to change its position. So we're headed to an interesting conflict up in the legislature, and we'll just have to find out what happens. Right now, it looks like the Senate is going to rule the day, and actually you're going to see very little legislation come out of the House and the Senate this year. I'm totally comfortable with that. My own personal view is as long as we have so many unemployed people, as long as we are still dealing with many new cases of coronavirus every week, we need to focus on getting our country back to normal and put off political fights, political bills for another day. We can fight about gun bills next year. This year, let's get the coronavirus under control, get everybody back to work, get unemployment checks out to everybody, and focus on getting our country back to normal. One thing I want to say, my cell phone number is 615-406-8719. And the only reason I say that is if you're a person and you are having trouble getting your unemployment benefits, we have people in my office right now doing nothing but helping with unemployment. The state got a slow start with unemployment. Many people are frustrated, and justifiably so. We can often speed up the process. So just call me on my cell phone or text me, and we'll get you in the system. And often that really speeds up the process for a person. So that's what's going on right now on the Hill. And I'm always ready to talk to any citizen about any particular issue in case I didn't address what you all are particularly interested in. Thank you so much, Councilman. I really appreciate it.
No problem. And thank you so much for coming on here and giving us those updates. I, for one, am very appreciative of the help you've provided some of my constituents when it's come to unemployment. I know they're thankful, and I'm thankful that I'm able to. I don't feel like I'm able to do much as a city councilman, and that's something I can't really help them with, but being able to get them in touch with you and hearing later that their problem has been solved, it makes me feel good knowing that in a little way I help them get connected with you and get their problems sorted out. So again, thank you. I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you about the vouchers with the 39 or 41 million that's now pretty much on the table again. I know that's probably not going to solve a lot of it, but could it be possible to put some of that money towards BEP, or has there been any movement towards ensuring the state actually is more equitable and puts more funding into the education system?
Well, it certainly could be done. The money is there, and you're right. We're underfunded under the basic education plan, and we could use more funding, particularly because, and it would make sense because the voucher funding was aimed for a program that was supposed to apply only to Metro and Shelby County, as you know. I think I would be a little dishonest to suggest that I thought it was likely that this money would be earmarked to Davidson County in a significant way. And the reason is simply that right now, I don't think the politics are there to be able to say that with any assurance. It's a good idea, though. It's a good use for that money. And in general, Davidson County is not getting its fair share of school money, and we should push for that. I have to say, I can't say with much confidence that I think that's what's going to happen to the voucher money, because I don't think the votes are going to be there to do that.
So someone was asking if you could repeat your phone number. I put it in the chat, but can you repeat it again for anybody that may not see the chat?
You bet. 615-406-8719. Just call me, tell me what the issue is, and then I'll get you with the right person. We have people that are specifically dealing with particular unemployment claims, and we can help you out.
Okay. Another question that came in via Zoom. I know you said private school vouchers got declined. Is there any additional help for our special education program? Many have to switch to private schools to receive better education.
Now that's a good question, and I should have clarified without having to be asked. You know, there's another program that provides funding for special education students in the form of funding that can be used for private education. To deal with, and it's in recognition of the fact that there's certain services that the existing public schools may not provide, that may not be properly tailored for a particular child. That program is not the same as the voucher program I'm talking about. It is in force and it exists today. And if you have a particular, you should call me, and the reason is because there is actually provide money for special ed students outside of the normal public school system. And that's not the same as the voucher program I was just talking about, which was supposed to be a more general program that would apply to all students in Davidson County with certain income limitations.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I don't see any more questions for you. You're more than welcome to stay on and watch the budget presentation, but I'm sure you probably have a lot you need to get taken care of tonight. So again, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and give us these updates. And I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it, and appreciate you giving me the time. And I am going to jump on to the next thing, but thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
No problem, Representative. Okay, so next on the agenda tonight, like I said, I'm going to give a brief little presentation. I figured instead of me just talking and speaking, it might be easier if people have stuff to look at, some visual aids. So I did a little presentation for you. And on top of that, I've got a representative from SEIU, Jason Freeman, to help answer any questions that I may not be able to answer budget-wise. And I also have Mr. Mike Jamison from the mayor's office, who can also answer any questions related to the mayor's budget or to the budget process, period. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. And can everybody see that? Right now I see Jason, I see your face. If you can give me a thumbs up, if you can see my screen, awesome. So I did a similar version of this with Councilmember Welch when we did a meeting with the East Thompson community. So if you were on that call, some of this might look familiar. I'm just simply calling this a budget conversation. Now, just going to put a disclaimer out there. The information in this presentation is purely for information. I am not endorsing the mayor's budget. I am not endorsing any of the substitute budgets. I am not endorsing a tax increase. I am not endorsing a tax increase. This is just to provide you with the information that we are working with on the city council to determine what's best going forward. So how did we get here? How did our budget get to be so bad? So as everybody remembers, in 2017, we went through a reappraisal. It happens every 4 years. The next one will be next year. As a part of that reappraisal process, we saw some areas of town, we saw taxes go up. Some areas we saw them go down. On this graph here, you see kind of a map of the county. You see in blue where property taxes went down. In red, that's where they went up. And determining the shade is how much or how little they went up. And if you notice at the bottom where I have it circled, the median appraised increase countywide was about 37%. Well, if you look at us here in District 13, ours went down. Not by a lot, but they went down. So because of that reappraisal, because of how property values went up, per state law, our property taxes have to generate a revenue neutral. So the tax rate had to go down. So tax rate was changed to 3.155, which made it the lowest tax rate in the history of Metro. The council had the opportunity to adjust that rate in order to bring in a little extra money. The decision was made not to touch it, to leave it at 3.155. Same with in 2018 and last year, we saw that the choices to increase the tax rate did not pass. So with that, and if you look at this chart as well, when you compare us with similar cities in the area, Wilson County, Rutherford County, Knox, Hamilton, Shelby, we were paying a lower tax than all those areas. And as everybody has probably heard, either through Bob Mendez or the mayor, when they mention our reserve fund or our savings account. This is a chart showing in 2018, the revenues of several large cities. Here at the very end, you see Detroit, Indianapolis, Charlotte, Denver, Seattle. They're well above what they need in their rainy day funds. If you look all the way here at the end, Nashville, in the red. About 6%, not even 10% in our reserve fund. Now, as it was told in the presentations by the mayor, by the end of this fiscal year, we will only have $12 million in savings. That equates to only a handful, if that, days of cash on hand. Now, over the years, some of the things that Metro has tried to do to balance the budget was they've sold off assets. Sometimes these assets were not sold at their full value. Previous administrations have refinanced the debt to try and push payments further back to lower the payments so that there'd be less money spent. Well, because of that, now we're at the point where all that work they did 5-10 years ago, we're now having to pay for it. We're having to pay the higher debt service because the debt has been pushed back. And then the other thing that's been done, which is what led to our low reserve fund, is we've taken money out of our savings account to help balance the budget. And we've not been able to put money back in that savings account. So this is where we're at with the current budget. And as everybody knows, when you do a budget or you balance your checkbook, you look at what you've got coming in versus what you've got going out, your revenue and expenses. So if you look over at revenue, last year's recurring revenue was 2.3 billion as it were, or so. You take out the non-recurring or one-time expenses, that's about 70 million. Then you add new revenue, which was 134.7 million, which means that the available money we have to spend was this 2.3 billion at the bottom. Now, if you take out what we're expected to lose because of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, you're looking at lost revenue to the amount of 280.6 million. So when you do all that math, that leaves us with 2.1 billion in actual money. Now, when you take out your expenses, which is done over here, it means our total expenses is 2.4. Well, when you do the math, that's a 332 million hole. So that's $332 million that we as a city have to come up with in order to balance our budget, which by charter and by state law, we have to do. So when the state comptroller came and talked to the council at the very beginning of this term, this graphic came from his presentation. A government has 5 ways that it can raise revenue. It can, or balance its budget. Raising revenue in the form of taxes and fees, cut spending, take out loans, take out from savings, or as he said, some wily accounting methods. But he also said because of our current situation, the only things we can do is cut spending and raise revenue. We cannot borrow any more money. We already as a city have more debt than the entire state of Tennessee. As I've already shown, we don't really have the reserves to draw from. And there's really no way you can work accounting methods to find $332 million. So that, again, leaves us with either raising revenues or cut spending. So in the mayor's proposed budget, he's already got 234 million in targeted savings. Then there's the hope that there's 27 million in federal COVID assistance that can be used to pay for certain services that the city would have paid for anyway, therefore saving us some money. And then he's put in about 21 million in cuts to discretionary spending. That's arts funding, that's some of our economic development money, et cetera, et cetera. But he's also proposing that $1 increase, which would bring in 332 million in new revenue. And just so everyone knows, Council Member at Large Bob Mendez just joined. Appreciate him hopping on. So I took these from the mayor's budget. These are just, again, some visuals. This one is the management actions that have been taken to try and save us some money. So as we all remember, when the state comptroller told us our fiscal year 20 budget wasn't going to do it, that we had to come up with $41 million to balance the books. The mayor did the corrective action plan. He got more money from the convention center, put in a hiring freeze, refinance some of our TIF financing to plug that hole. Fiscal year 21, capital spending is reduced, delayed, paused, 39. New revenue sources, So again, got more money out of some of these downtown entities, savings from operating reductions, target savings and departmental cuts, and cost avoidance to about 3 million. And then over this bar graph right here just basically shows our revenues, the budget. So we have property taxes, the lost sales tax, grants and other contributions, and anything else. This is showing where all that money's going. Got metro departments, public schools, debt service, and that fund balance, or again, that savings account. Now, there are tax relief options that are currently in place, and that if this tax rate does get increased, could be open to certain individuals. There's a property tax relief, which is state law provides for the property tax relief for low-income elderly and disabled homeowners, as well as disabled veteran homeowners and their surviving spouses. This is a state program funded by appropriations authorized by the General Assembly. There's also the property tax freeze. Under the program, qualifying homeowners aged 65 and older can freeze the tax due on their properties at the amount for the year that they qualify, even if that tax rate increases. Homeowners must have been 65 by December 31st of the tax year for which they are applying. So for instance, if someone was to apply right now for this program, and you live in the General Services District, your taxes would stay at $2.75. If you're in the urban services, your taxes would stay at the $3.15, and until as long as you have that property. Now, the tax deferral program, if you qualify this program, the current taxes on your residence may be deferred until the death of the person receiving the deferral or that the residence is sold, and shall be subject to simple interest rate of 6% a year. So this means you are deferring your tax bill. You're not paying your tax bill, but once you pass away or you sell that property, you have to pay the taxes that you've been deferring. Now, there's an easy tool, and you can find this on the trustees website and the property assessor's website. If you're curious to know, what would your taxes be if the mayor's budget or if one of these substitute budgets go into effect. And it basically, what it does, this calculation, as a residential property, you only pay 25% of the assessed value of your home. Commercial properties are at 40%. So basically, you could find the assessed value of your home, again, through the property assessor's website, multiply that by 25%, and that will get you what you're paying taxes on. And then you multiply that by the tax rate. So, for example, in the urban services, so if you're in District 13 and you live to the west or to the south of the airport, you're urban. 25,000 times 100 equals 250 times the tax rate. So you end up with $788.75. That's if you're paying, again, this 25,000 would be the assessed value you're paying on. General services, same thing. Now, over here, I put in some of the current proposals. As of right now, Council members Benedict and O'Connell have opted not to file their substitutes. Councilmember Mendez, I believe, is still trying to determine which substitute, if any, that he'll be putting forward. And right now, as far as Councilmember at Large Glover's proposal, we don't have any details, but it's probably going to be around a 20% increase. And again, down here at the bottom, if you want to write down this information, this is the website for the tax assessor, or the trustee's office, as it were, and the property assessor. And if you need these later, I'll be happy to send them to you. Now, some common questions that we've been getting on the council and some opinions and ideas to try to prevent a property tax increase was, why don't we just increase sales tax to tourists who are causing the strain on our city? Well, sales tax cannot be done by the council. It has to be a countywide referendum for any increase to sales tax. And we saw in 2018, when this was put on the ballot, the people of Davidson County, when asked to pay an extra $1 in sales tax, shut it down. Plus, part of our budget shortfall right now is the fact that we haven't had tourists. We haven't had people going out and buying a lot. So we really can't tax something that's not there. Some ideas of, why don't we charge impact development fees? I've co-sponsored a bill in the council to try and do that. However, we have to wait on state law to change. Right now, state law prevents cities and counties from charging developmental impact fees. Williamson County and I believe Rutherford County were grandfathered in because they had already passed impact fees prior to the state law going into effect. So as of right now, that's not something that we can do. Cut spending. Well, as I've shown, the mayor's already done a lot to cut spending. But over the last few years, our city has had to cut and cut and cut, so that many of these departments really don't have anywhere else to cut. So many people complain about the services already: sidewalks, trash, the fact that it takes so long for first responders to get somewhere for a non-emergency. It's because these departments have had to cut over the years and let positions go unfilled. We can't cut anymore and not expect our services to suffer even more. So many people say, well, why don't we do like a business and lay off employees? Government is not a business. Regardless of what happens, government still has to function. The trash still has to be picked up. The police still have to go out on patrols. So on top of that, the council can't mandate that the city government lay off employees. That's ultimately a decision that's left up to the different departmental managers. And going with on that same tangent, people are saying, well, why not cut council salary? Besides it being a very small drop in the bucket, by charter, if we were to vote on cutting our salary, it wouldn't go into effect until the next term, which would be in 2023. So we would not see any savings for this year. And just one little, I hate to say that as a warning, but this is pretty much the feeling that I got from the comptroller when he gave us a presentation a few months ago. If we don't get our city finances in order, there's a very real possibility the state could come in and take over the running and operating of our budget in our city. And I have little doubt that once they stepped in, they would raise taxes, they would cut services, and they would lay off employees. So just something to keep in mind there. All right, and with that, I'll open the floor to questions.
Councilman, there's one question from Facebook. It's probably already been answered, but I'll pass it on to you.
Okay.
One would like to know, why should it only be the property owners that need to be taxed?
The simple answer to that, and Councilmember Mendez, anyone that would like to jump in on this one, I'll be more than happy. The property owners, they're the largest block of taxable income for the city. There's not much variation from year to year, and so it's a reliable source. Sales taxes, as we can see, you can have one bad year and your sales tax revenue's out the window. That's where I'll leave it. But Councilmember Mendez, I see you unmuted, so I'll let you have a crack at that.
Sure. I got bad lighting once it gets after dark, so bear with me. In Tennessee, we don't get to invent any taxes here in Davidson County. We can only do the taxes that the state lets us do. And Tennessee law is really and I guess I should say I'm one of the council members at large. Thanks for having me. We were just on another call, Councilmember Bradford and I and a bunch of other council members for a couple hours talking over the budget. I'm glad to be able be with you guys. So under Tennessee law, the state sets out a list of taxes that we're able to do. And if it's not on the list, we can't do it. And you all know that there's no income tax in Tennessee. And so because there's no income tax in Tennessee, cities, towns, counties really only have two ways that they get most of their money. And that's property tax and sales tax. I'm sure you guys have noticed that we've already got a sales tax that is almost to the full maximum allowed by state law. And that means when the city needs new revenue, the only thing we've got that will raise enough money to make a difference is the property tax. In the council, Councilman Bradford has voted for this. I voted for this. We've been on a tear in trying to get random fees increased, fees and permits, and a lot of those things have gone up, especially over the last 6 months, trying to drive more revenue. But this is going to sound like an exaggeration, but it's not. You could double every fee that you can possibly think of, and it probably wouldn't. Well, I'm sure it would not get rid of the need for a property tax increase. So, bottom line, the way Tennessee law is set up, cities and counties are sort of shepherded toward property tax as the main way to get money, and so that's why that's the focus.
Anybody on the call have any questions? Jason, is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just say on the property tax question, one thing I think that we would like to remind people about is that it's the most equitable way to raise revenue in Nashville. The more expensive your home is, the more you pay in taxes. The less expensive your home is, the less you pay in taxes. And the commercial properties pay a higher tax rate than the residential properties because they pay on 40% of their assessed value, and they pay residents pay on 25% of their assessed value. And I hear a lot of times people ask, why can't we tax downtown? Well, if your home is worth $250,000 and you pay $50 extra a month, the downtown Hilton hotel that's worth $100 million will pay $33,000 a month. So it really is the way that we get the money from the bigger businesses.
Thanks for that, Jason. Any other questions? I felt like this would be, a lot of people would have questions or want to ask about the budget. Let's see. One just came through the. Go ahead, Matt. Were you about to ask one?
You have some questions in the chat.
Will any of the cuts to Metro Arts budget be offset by CARES funding? I know that they will receive some funding, but I'm not aware of the specific amount. Do you have an idea of how much might be restored through federal funding? So I am not sure if the Metro Arts cuts could be balanced using CARES funding. Mr. Jameson might be able to shed some light on that. I know the groups like Stand Up Nashville have put out ideas on how we could use some of that CARES funding to help the city, especially in the fact that I'm speaking for myself on this one, that the fact that we're having to raise property taxes or vote on raising property taxes is directly related to the impact of COVID-19 on our city. So we could try to use that money to help some of our harder hit residents with either helping them pay their tax bill out of some of this money or other ways to help. But Mr. Jameson, would you like to kind of chime in a little bit about what CARES funding or?
Absolutely, Councilman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. First, if I can, I promise I'm not brown nosing as much as this sounds like, but just having watched the council in action in the last couple of days, I would want to assure your constituents on this call the level of service that you and Councilman Mendez have been providing. This is the most difficult period of the council year, traditionally, the budget season, but I think I would want to assure your constituents, in my personal history, serving on the council and working for the council since, I guess, 2003, I've never seen a council that has had to work harder. An infamous meeting that set records 2 nights ago, and I'm sure you're both recovering from sleep deprivation, but it's just been an honor, and I would want your constituents to know how hard you've been working, and tonight is another example of that. The CARES Act that was adopted and signed by the president in late May without a lot of regulatory guidance. The guidance does continue to come out as late as late last week. The 3 general principles that guide what is an eligible cost is it has to be incurred and spent by December 30th of this year. It has to be related to COVID, to addressing the pandemic. But thirdly, and I guess most troublingly, an expenditure cannot be one that is replacing something that's currently in your budget. So if you had arts funding that is existing in your budget now or prior to the pandemic, it is likely ineligible for CARES Act subsidy, if you will. We do have a specialist in the finance office, Mary Jo Wiggins, who is on a daily basis maintaining familiarity with the emerging regulations. We do have a pretty solid figure from DC that we will be receiving $121 million of CARES Act recovery direct to Nashville and Davidson County. Councilman Mendez spearheaded an effort to establish a committee for the appropriate spending of that money, how best to designate it. And I think one of the biggest decisions that we should await before making any allocation is that the state's allocation, Tennessee, will be a minimum of $2.3 billion. And until we know exactly how they will be making those disbursements, it would make better sense for Nashville to await and see what the state will be funding before we allocate dollars, limited dollars in comparison. Should the state decide to come to the rescue of arts and make an allocation there, that saves us our 121 allocation towards something else of dire need. But those are pretty broad strokes, but I hope it's somewhat answered the question.
I've got one more from Zoom and one more from Facebook. So let me get to the Zoom one and then we'll get to the Facebook question. So the People's Budget Coalition lists the $6 million spending increase for the criminal legal system. Mr. Mendez says that this is a result of a true-up. Is it possible to get an explanation of what that means? So I'll throw this over to you, Councilman.
Yeah, and thanks for the question. I was just halfway through typing an answer to it in the chat, but I guess that wouldn't go to everybody on the call. What I was reacting to, I think that refers to a tweet I made in the middle of the council meeting. Most of the speakers, a lot of the speakers, not all the speakers, use different language to describe that $6 million gap. I think I was tweeting relatively early on when more people, I was hearing them say that it was $6 million more for the police department. And I've since had a chance, now that I got some sleep, to read what the People's Budget Coalition has online. And like this comment, it refers to $6 million more for the criminal legal system. And I've been reacting to trying to figure out how the heck people could have $6 million more for the police department, because that's not right. but now that I've seen the report talking about being more specific about for the criminal legal system, which I'm looking at it now, includes police, sheriff, courts, district attorney, public defender, data and tech, family safety, and the oversight board. There probably is 6 million more for all those things combined. I think the lion's share of it would be police and sheriff, but across this whole thing. So basically, I was reacting to people saying 6 million more for police as opposed to what it says in the report.
And Councilman Bradford, could I tack on to Councilman Mendez's comments?
Sure, go ahead.
In listening to the very passionate and certainly respected opinions that we heard Tuesday night from so many people, we were concerned by some possible miscommunication about what they meant by the increases in criminal justice spending. And going back and looking at the numbers they were touting, I would want to point out that when they referred to the court system, they were including the civil court system in that figure, which of course has, that's a wholly separate section from the criminal justice provision. But also the suggestion that the police department was somehow the beneficiary of some largesse in this budget is just not accurate. I mean, this budget maintains precisely the same number of personnel as last year. And in fact, just because of the natural population growth in Nashville, the per capita spending has actually slightly decreased. Not what we'd like, but it is certainly not any sort of largesse compared to last year's police budget.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to add something onto that. I want to be real clear. I dipped my toes into trying to, I mean, there were people saying things where the numbers weren't exactly correct, and I dipped my toes into trying to correct that on Twitter in real time, not out of criticism, just to get the facts squared away. And I got a pretty heavy dose of shut up, Bob. And that's fine. I mean, we were there to listen. It was a public hearing. And so I stopped addressing the fact issues. And to me, the specific fact issues about the numbers are sort of beside the point. You know, what I heard loud and clear, and which I really appreciated about the hearing, was the spirit behind the comments of basically spend less on aggressive after the fact, after things have gone wrong, criminal justice, and invest more in social services to make sure we don't get there. That message received loud and clear, and couldn't agree with it more. So,
And I have to add too, I'm sorry to cut you off, Councilman.
Go ahead.
I kind of feel the same way, and I've always felt if we want to improve the safety of our neighborhoods, it's all about ensuring that there's jobs for people to go to, that anybody who's wanting to, improve their lives has the opportunity, whether it's through education, through employment, through a safe and respectable outlet for them to find a hobby. If we improve that, I feel like we can improve our neighborhoods a lot more. But I also feel like we don't have enough police to safely patrol our city. And the comment I made to someone who sent me an email is, the solution is not less cops, because right now our problem is we don't have enough, and they're being overworked, in my opinion. They're being stretched to the max. And to me, that's a recipe for disaster. If you have a workforce in a very high stress job with so much at stake, and they are working too much because there's not enough of them to go around, then you're setting yourselves up for it's a powder keg. And so do I think our police need to be a paramilitary force? No, I don't think they should. And I think we should look at making sure that the money we're giving to the police is to go pay for more police, to help increase their salaries so that they can be more competitive, so that we're not losing police to other counties. We should be buying assault vehicles if we are. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be doing a lot of this stuff. So that's my 2 cents. And I definitely appreciate everybody that came out Tuesday night to let us hear their voices. If nobody else has anything to add to that, I'll turn it over to Facebook for that Facebook question.
Councilman, bear with me here for a second, trying to scroll back up. There's a question regarding the tax rate. So bear with me as I try to put these two together. Are high-rise office and residential buildings taxed at the same rates as small homes and small commercial buildings? An example would be small commercial versus huge corporate commercial buildings.
I can take that one if you
Yeah,
want.
please do.
Yeah, so this is another place where we're 1,000% totally, absolutely locked in by state law, and we have no choice in the matter. State law lets there be a distinction between residential and commercial. And so there is a difference. If you all remember, Russ had the slide about how to figure out the property taxes on your house. And at some point he had, you multiply the value by 0.25. If you have a commercial property, instead of multiplying by 0.25, you multiply by 0.4. And so there's more tax that comes from commercial buildings per dollar than houses. And that state law drives that. But what we cannot do is to have one tax rate for a lower value property, like my house, compared to a high-rise downtown. Either way, the same property tax rates have to apply, and that is hard locked in state law. I think one of the easiest things to pass would be, and we hear this idea a lot, to say, well, let's have, if your house is worth, $300,000 or $400,000 or less, let's pay one tax rate. But if your house is worth more than $1 million, or if your commercial property is worth 10 million, let's load up that tax rate more because they could afford it more. And that just state law doesn't let us do that at all.
And Councilman Bradford, you might relay how aggressively the council has always acted to take advantage when a residential property crossed the line, if you will. Short-term rental properties that are not owner-occupied. Quickly, council acted to make sure those were designated as commercial properties at the higher rate, so we would derive that much more revenue from people who are not actually occupying the homes as a residence.
That's good to know. I've had several people ask me if non-owner occupied STRs pay residential or commercial, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Jason, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, not to that specifically.
Just want to make sure you had opportunity since Councilmember Mendez and Mr. Jameson spoke. I'm not seeing any more questions in Zoom. We'll check. We've got a few more from Facebook.
All right, and this is more related to a local issue. Someone is asking why one side of Elm Hill Pike has what they've coined free trash pickup and the other side has to pay for their trash.
I'm actually glad somebody brought this question up. So you've heard us talk about USD and GSD, Urban Services District, General Services District. Basically, the quick rundown of what that is before you had metropolitan government, you had City of Nashville and Davidson County. So you had a city and a county government. When the two governments merged, you had two tax bases. So as I kind of explain it, and anybody is free to correct me or back me up, if the General Services District now kind of I equate to you live in the county, because you pay for basic services. You pay just the basic tax. Whereas if you're in the urban area, you pay a little extra for trash pickup, for recycling, for street lights. And so in District 13, we are split. There is a small area east of the airport that is urban services. And I believe, I don't have the map in front of me, but it is the neighborhood that is behind Cracker Barrel. So it is the property north of Blackwood Drive up to I-40. And then, like I said earlier, if you're to the west or the south of the airport, you're urban services. But if you're south of Blackwood Drive, all the way down to Couchville, you're in general services. So to answer the question, the reason one side of that area gets these services is their general services. I mean, they're urban services. So they are technically part of the city tax rate, whereas the rest of the neighborhood is under that general services. So the neighbors have to pitch in and get and pay for the 1 or 2 street lights on the road. They have to pay extra each month for trash pickup. Some houses may pay extra for recycling. Our neighborhood, we don't get recycling, so we have to go take ours to the facility at McGavock Pike or McGavock High School. So that, to answer the question, that's why they're on the different service districts.
Councilman Bradford, I think that actually may be, I may defer to Councilman Mendez here, but I think that issue may come up in the next couple of weeks with some council members exploring the legitimacy of the difference between the two districts. Historically, what you would hear, just as you were summarizing, the Urban Services District got, in exchange for a slightly higher rate, they got trash and recycling pickup, they got street lights, and they got optimized police and fire. I think traditionally the argument between the two residents is the General Services District resident says there's really a sort of a declining difference between the two districts, and Urban Services Districts would say there's really a declining level of services. The police and fire used to be on 2 very different radio frequencies between the two districts back in the day where radio frequencies didn't travel that far. But now the police and fire both subscribe to essentially the same service across the county. So some would say there is no optimal service in the USD, but this gets very emotional and very Hatfield and McCoy, so to speak, between USD and GSD residents.
Well, Mr. Jameson, fun fact, you bring up Hatfield to McCoy's, I'm related to both of them. My grandmother and my grandfather, so on my mom's side, one branch is from Kentucky, one branch is from West Virginia, so there's Hatfield McCoy blood running through me. I always joke that explains my temper sometimes. So was there any more questions on, or did that answer the question? Anybody else wanted to chime in on that? Now I will say, and I spoke on this on the campaign trail, one of my goals was before the end of this year. I knew going up to the budget that would be a focus, but probably in the fall, since I had so many questions on this in the GSD area of the district about the difference, I was going to try and have a series of community meetings in the GSD area and invite Public Works, invite members of council who have gone through the process of changing over to provide the pros and the cons and kind of give everybody information about what the differences are, the benefits and whatnot. And it is possible that if the residents want to move into the Urban Services District, the council can file legislation to do that. So if the majority of people in general services want to pay the extra property tax to get trash, get recycling, get street lights, then that's what we can do. And I will say, just in our neighborhood, we have an HOA, and we did the math. And the amount that we'd be paying extra in property taxes, we would still be saving a couple $100s a month between what we pay in electric and trash pickup. So not every situation will probably be that way, but something to think about. So next question from Facebook.
I'm going to just kind of throw these lumped in. There's another question regarding property tax. Can the downtown quarter have a specialized property tax? Also, within the tax question, do the 7 cities within Davidson County, Berry Hill, Forest Hills, Belmead, do they pay their taxes differently? And how are their tax rates determined?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I'll defer to you, Councilman.
I can do some of that, and then I might need Mike to, or maybe Jason to help me out. So downtown does pay a slightly different tax rate. There's a thing called a business improvement district. And again, this is totally generated by state law because we can only do what state law allows. So there's a CBID, Central Business Improvement District, where if you get a certain percentage of property owners in a certain area that's with certain boundaries that are created, then the property owners in that area can vote to have themselves a little surcharge of taxes that they pay. And if you're ever downtown and you see, the garbage cans are a little bit different and nicer, and you see the people on the segways wearing the yellow shirts that clean up, those people are all getting paid for out of the extra property tax money that gets collected downtown in the business improvement district. There's another business improvement district that's been just created out near Hickory Hollow off of I-24 in Antioch. That's going to be used for a little extra road improvement, I think, maybe improved lighting in the area. But anyway, on downtown, there is a little bit more that they pay. It can't be, and by state law, it can't be forced on downtown. So the rest of the county couldn't get together and say, y'all are going to pay more property taxes. But the owners in a particular area can agree to have a surcharge and have a business improvement district run how that money gets spent. On the various satellite cities, I think there are differences. Goodlettsville, I know, charges a separate property tax and has separate services they pay for. I think some of the other ones, I think Belmead, Forest Hills, Oak Hill, I don't think they've got a separate property tax. Jason or Mike, do you guys know that?
My understanding, Councilman, is that the Metro government has no say-so whatsoever over the satellite cities' property tax rate. They themselves can assess just as they do in Goodlettsville. We do provide by contractual agreement services to those satellite cities per agreement. We have, for example, a variety of contracts with Belmead, Forest Hills, which we refrain from police intervention there unless called, allowing their own city services to provide that. Same with some park services, but that is all a function of contractual negotiations between the two governments. That does not extend to give us any authority to adjust property tax rates.
Well, but they pay Metro property taxes. It's just a matter of whether the individual satellite cities add their own tax on top of that. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. So the answer to the question is they pay Metro, they pay exactly the same property taxes as, if they have a neighbor across the street that's not in the satellite city, they pay the same Metro ones, and then the cities can charge an additional amount for additional services that they provide locally.
Yep.
So to kind of follow up, just from my personal clarification, the satellite cities, they'd be part of the GSD tax rate, right? They wouldn't be charged the USD.
I think that is right. I'm just thinking in my head if there are any that are within the USD, but I think they're all GSD.
That sounds right, Russ.
Do we have any more questions from Facebook?
One or two. This one is, what about the teachers being overworked? And I'm going to follow that up with another comment of, let's put money into things that prevent crime, such as our public schools and after-school programs. This should be a budget priority. And there's one other, I was working to get clarification on, but haven't gotten it yet, about body cameras.
Okay. I think it's safe to say we would love to ensure that our public education gets the proper funding. It's kind of in line with the reason I asked that question of Representative Stewart earlier. It comes down to the state of Tennessee really doesn't give us a fair amount of money to pay for our schools. So that leaves up to Metro to put more money in the pot. And Jason, I know you're very knowledgeable about stuff like that, so I could let you kind of tack onto that.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share my screen for a second?
Sure. I think I'll have to make you a host.
Well, while you're doing that, if we can, I just wanted to show a comparison of sort of what other cities spend per pupil.
Okay, you
compared to
should be
what-
able to share now. Let me,
People see that graphic?
yep, I see it.
So what you're looking at is a comparison of how our education funding per pupil compares to other cities. And we tried to pick cities that were similarly situated in the country. So we look, Birmingham, Alabama is a little bit lower than us per pupil. We're at about $11,730 per student. And, I know you hear a lot about, the school budget it's $1 billion. So that's a real lot of money. But there's 80,000 students in Metro Public Schools. There's something like 170 school buildings. It's a massive operation to educate our kids. And so if you look, Dallas, Texas is higher than us. And as you go along, Baton Rouge, Louisville, Kentucky, Little Rock, Austin, Texas, Charleston, South Carolina, when you get up to 16,000, that's almost $5,000 per student more every year. And so it's a school district that's been underfunded for a very long time. And, I think that it's just important for people to understand that. And one other thing about our schools that I wanted to point out is someone who represents the support staff in our school system. The support staff, the paraprofessionals, food service, and other people that help fill out the roles of education are some of the lowest paid in Metro government. There are 1,500 people at Metro Public Schools that make less than $15 an hour. Generally, they're paid for 7.5 hours a day and for 10 months out of the year. But there's actually 20 days when school is not open and they don't get paid for those 20 days. So that's another month, and they're really paying, for 9 months. And so you're in a situation where you have folks that can work at Metro schools for 15 or 20 years and still not make $30,000 a year. And I just say that because I know that everyone out there is having a hard time with COVID-19. And I hear people talking about, laying off Metro employees or making sure they're, freezing their pay and everything. But I just want people to understand that a lot of these folks are working, used to work 2 and 3 jobs. And in many cases, they've lost their second job. They've lost their third job. And they're still, going to be there to educate the kids. So that's all I really want to add about education. So thank you for letting me do that.
Appreciate it. And can you repeat that question from Facebook? I want to make sure that we got everything.
Regarding the body cams?
Oh, no, wasn't there multiple parts to the school funding question?
Just a comment, just her comment of putting money into things that prevent crime, such as our public schools and after-school programs.
Okay. And so the last question from Facebook was about, can we get body cameras funded in this year's budget? I know it was brought up on the meeting this afternoon, but I had to jump off so I can get ready for this. Councilmember Mendez, could you give an update on where we're at with this? I know body cameras right now has been a very hot topic. And
yes. All right. So I'm going to give a little bit of a long version here to set the context. As the body camera conversation has spanned 3 mayors. As I think you all know, we've managed to have 3 mayors in 3.5 years. Not exactly stability. So the body camera story starts under Mayor Barry, and the decision was made to get body cameras. That announcement was made really before there was, I think even the mayor's office at the time understood what that means practically. And what it means practically is officers take video, police officers store video. Then if somebody gets charged with something, the information has to go to the district attorney's office, ultimately to the public defender or a criminal, and then ultimately a court and a court clerk's office, and then finally stored forever in a public record in the court's file. And video ends up with a lot of personal information that has to be scrubbed out. The faces of minors. If it's video in a house, there could be bills with social security numbers. It's a lot of data and a lot of data scrubbing. And what appears to have happened is both in the Barry and Briley administrations, nobody in the mayor's office took charge of the project, even though publicly the mayors were all for it. And so what happened was the police department during those couple of years started building its own custom tech system to store video. And there was apparently no global conversation between them and the DA and the public defender and the courts. And so when the police department declared last summer that they were ready to go with the program, people like the DA's office said, hey, that's awesome that you're ready to start capturing video. Like, what are we supposed to do with it? And there had been no coordination. Mayor Cooper came into office and I think to his credit, put a couple of his top special projects people on top of getting to the bottom of what, frankly, the story I just told you is a story that they got to the bottom of in their first month in office. And Cooper's decision was, pardon my language, screw this, waiting around to build the perfect system. Let's just deploy a sample now, and we can figure it out on the fly, because we've already blown a couple of years trying to build the perfect system, when in fact, nobody was trying to build the perfect system. Nobody was in charge. So Cooper committed to getting a field test that was small in the field and let all these departments figure it out on the fly. That is, Mike could help me out here, but that's a couple months old, Mike, the field testing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And so the proposed budget has this so-called pilot for the body cameras proceeding. It's about a $1.9 million price tag. I know this is a hot topic for council members as they're looking at the amendments and substitutes portion of the budget process. One thing that I know the mayor remains a little concerned about is Councilman Bradford and Mendez, you may remember the presentation by the consultant who looked at the total cost of body camera implementation and gave all of us a bit of a sticker shock sentiment. The mayor has since heard from similarly sized cities, Chattanooga, Andy Burke, for example. He has deployed body cameras in all of Chattanooga, I believe, for $500,000. It's something incredibly modest compared to what was being quoted to us. So the pilot, of course, doesn't lock us into a less advantageous rate with a contractor yet, but that is something the mayor wants to explore, and part of the reason why the pilot made sense.
And I'll wrap it up because I know that's been a little bit long-winded. So it's important for that context to understand, at least my political position on it is, I know firsthand that the mayor has had a couple of his top strategy people on this from the day they got in office. I know that a little bit about the story I told has been out on WPLN and a little bit in the Tennessean. I personally believe in that finally there's a mayor who's committed to getting them deployed. But moving beyond the sample size, the testing will require all those departments that I mentioned earlier actually getting to the finish line on how to coordinate. I believe we're going to see a lot of progress in the next year on this front.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic that I feel like it may not be the size of what everybody's looking for, but I think Mayor Cooper is being very practical and doing this pilot program, and hopefully this will turn into departmental wide. So we're almost out of time, but there's one last question we'll get to, and then I'll let everybody go for the night. So the question is, will there be a public comment period for the third reading of the budget? If so, will you handle the format of that differently? So right now, there is not. However, I did reach out to the council office after the events of this past week because I personally feel, and I'm just going to speak for myself, one hearing on the budget is not enough. I personally feel like there should be more, that the minute the budget is announced, we need to be having hearings and letting people have their say. Now, people can still email, they can call, and they can voice their opinions that way, but I definitely think one public hearing is not enough. Per charter, and this was explained by Council Director Cooper, that any public hearing would have to be advertised in the paper for 7 days. So, and I got clarification later that the council itself would have to vote to have another hearing. So we're not meeting again until this coming up Tuesday. So if I or Councilmember Mendez or anybody else brought up the motion to have another public hearing, then the soonest we could probably have a hearing would be a week from that Wednesday, because I'm assuming the advertisement would not go out to the next day. So by that point, it'd be the day after we have the third reading. So for this year, I don't think it's going to happen, but I would hope that next year we learn from this and we try to have more hearings on the budget.
Do you mind if I comment on that real quick?
Sure, I was about to hand it over to you.
So a few things. I know it seems, well, it was difficult the other evening, but I'm in my 5th year. Jameson has been, Mike Jameson, who's in the mayor's office now, he mentioned he's been around maybe 15 budget seasons. There is absolutely no question that the amount of public feedback we've gotten so far in this budget process easily is greater than any year that I've been involved in. Mike, do you feel that way about your 15 or so years at it?
Wholly agree. Wholly agree.
And so, I mean, that's not a full answer, and I don't mean that to be a statement that there's no room for improvement. But I got to tell you, from the position of where I'm sitting, I set up a folder to capture in my inbox the emails that are telling us to defund the police department. I set that up 26 hours ago, and I'm looking at the folder right now. There's 1,335 emails in that folder in the last 26 hours. With apologies, I can tell everybody I'm not going to read 1,300 emails, but I'm going to read through them enough to know what they say. And this is easily more public participation than we've ever had. In a weird way, the COVID-19 has made us set up this phone call mechanism that we used the other day, which allowed much more participation, and we're getting more emails. So And I guess the other thing I would add is that I hope, first of all, watching government is always painful. I mean, it's a representative democracy. It's always sort of weird looking and glitchy, but especially this year. Please, I hope nobody makes judgments about the process off of how it goes this year. We're literally making up the process as we go. And at least from my chair, I'm impressed at how much feedback we've gotten. If the vice mayor were to decide that he wanted to have a public hearing, I've already told him that if he wanted to do it again, my recommendation is, I'll tell you exactly what I suggested to him. I told him to have it be 2 people per district for 35 districts, first come, first serve, with people being alternates. And even at that, we'd have 70 people show up at 2 minutes a pop. We'd listen to another couple hours. And I don't personally think that's necessary given how much feedback we've gotten. But if he did it, I would be very opposed. Another open-ended, as many people as we can. I think we got all the messages that the community had to share on that, and I'd want to keep it on a time limit. But I don't think it's necessary, frankly.
Well, and with that, there's no more questions from Facebook. I don't see any more on Zoom. We're almost at 8 o'clock. I want to thank our guest tonight, State Rep Mike Stewart, who was on here earlier, Councilmember at Large Bob Mendez, Jason Freeman from SEIU, Mr. Mike Jameson from the Mayor's Office. Thank y'all for coming on and helping me answer some of these questions and speak on these issues. And to everybody who is watching both on Zoom and on Facebook, thank you for taking some time to join us tonight for the town hall. I hope that anybody that has questions, I hope we were able to answer them for you. As always, if you want to reach me, my phone number is 615-200-0158. My email is russ, R-U-S-S, .bradford@nashville.gov. And you can also reach me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So with that, thank you again, everybody. Well, I'll do the best I can for everybody in this district. I appreciate y'all putting me in this office, and I'm doing my best to serve y'all. With that, good night, everybody.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thanks, Russ.